Welcome to the Western Bell podcast series, with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of this series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled, Walking the Razor's Edge, a Talk on Attention. The talk was given by Juanita Violini on April 13th, 2024 via Zoom. Juanita is an artist and writer-producer of interactive mystery entertainment who has been a student of the spiritual path for over 35 years. In this talk, she notes that the journey of self-discovery is like walking on a razor's edge, which we fall off when we lose our attention. She says that when our attention is taken, we cannot access our intuition. Juanita considers ways of working with attention, and a quote from Jean de Salzman that appeared in the email notice for the talk. She suggests that our attention is all that we have, or the most important thing that we have. There is interaction with those in attendance about the Gurdjieffian ideas of self-observation and self-remembering during the discussion. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. Juanita Violini.
This talk is dedicated to whoever is listening, to you guys here, and to anyone listening to the podcast later who is curious and interested in a more encompassing point of view of life. When I think of the razor's edge, I think that we're actually born on the razor's edge. At birth, we are at one end of the edge, and our life journey is to travel along the razor, for a metaphor. And at the end of the razor's edge is death. I think when we're born on the razor's edge, it's visionary. Not many people remember being born. But when we're born on the razor's edge, we're in a state of relaxed well-being. And for a time, we can see whatever we see, and we see it clearly. And we start moving along the razor's edge. And this is our journey through life, through time and space. And this has all our life experiences on it or along it. So in the beginning, we're carried along because we're too young to walk. We're carried along through time and space. And the razor's edge is narrow, but it's wide enough to go along relaxed and in a state of well-being. There are two sides to the razor's edge, and on one side is duality, and the other side is non-duality. There's lots of words for this. It could be content and context, or the illusion of separation and non-separation. In the beginning, when we're young, we're very relaxed, but then at some point, we're going to discover that we can fall off the razor's edge. Although I think in the beginning, maybe we're accidentally dropped off the razor's edge, or maybe even pushed in some cases. And then we're no longer feeling relaxed in a state of well-being. And then this sets us up for our life journey. And it seems like we spend a lot of the rest of our life either jumping or falling from the razor's edge. Even if we fall from the razor's edge, we still follow the path of the razor. But when we're on top of it, we can see clearly, and we can see what is as it is. If we're following the path at the base, then things are murky and we're consumed by doubt and other conditions that leave us weak and ineffectual. And we long to return to the relaxation and sense of well-being. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to define what I mean by the razor's edge and to give you a bit of a visual, a picture of what that could be so you could follow along. And the second thing I want to talk about is how we fall off and get back on the razor's edge. We fall when our attention is taken from us. When our attention is taken by identification, attachment, comparisons, stories we have about ourselves and others, now we're at the bottom of the razor. We're not seeing clearly anymore. But I think that something happens before we start having our attention taken by things of attachment and comparison. And that is that we lose trust and we are thrust into survival. The other thing is, once we're at the bottom and we're not seeing clearly, and we're also trained and conditioned not to look at ourselves. I don't know about anyone else here, but I deal with still looking at myself in a mirror or having my picture taken. Like, I don't want to. Does anyone else here have that or something like that? Thank you. Well, I think it's not an uncommon thing. And if it's not wanting to look at yourself in a mirror in pictures, there's probably other things that show up that signify a similar reluctance, maybe, for me to see myself as I am. Or maybe it's just fear. Maybe I'm just scared to. But I think it's true for me and for many others. We are trained not to look at ourselves. We're trained to look at our faults, though. It's not exclusive to women. I think everyone along the way, or not everyone, but a lot of people pick up body shame. Or now all these Instagram face filters where you have the pouty lips and all the filters you can put on. There's not a lot of authentic representation, shall we say. And that's okay, so long as you know it for what it is, so long as you're not identified with what you're thinking you're seeing is. Does anyone else feel that you've been trained to look at your faults more than yourself? Yes? Okay, good, because this is going to be a really short talk if I'm the only one that's true of. So I also think that it's a one way we're controlled as well, right? Focus on your faults, focus on what's wrong with you. It's like we're controlled. I don't know who's doing the controlling, maybe ego, that if we look in deep to ourselves, really, really look at ourselves, then we'll see raw power inside ourselves. And we'll see clarity looking back at us. And we need the power and the clarity to grow into maturity and ruthless compassion. And then we will be uncontrollable. And when we know who we are, if we can look deeply into ourselves and know who we are, then we know who others are as well. And we have a clear vision and a sharp sword. And we're sheathed in well-being and relaxation. And we are the razor's edge. Our attention is stolen from us, though, and it pushes us from this place. And it stops us from accessing our intuition. And it stops us from being able to truly take the time to examine ourselves and what is going on. I think one of the biggest things that takes our attention is self-hatred. And it starts as children. When we're children, we think we're the center of the universe. And so if anything goes wrong, it's got to be our fault. And then as we get older and we get consumed by self-hatred, that we're not children anymore, it's harder to see that self-hatred is just another way of being self-centered. So since we're not trained to look at ourselves and don't know how to see ourselves, then where does that leave us? So for me, self-hatred and I are like, we're tight. When I get a contracted feeling in my body and I feel bad, then automatically I'll assume that I feel bad because I am bad. And then I hate myself. And then down that rabbit hole. But if I can catch myself in the moment of the contraction before the story kicks in, then I can examine, where is this sensation? Where is this feeling coming from? And you really need to pause. We need to pause to examine it. Is this bad feeling, this contraction, because I'm out of integrity? That's a real possibility. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, but have I shared information that's not mine to share and I should feel bad? Have I taken something that's not mine to take? Am I hurting someone's feelings because I feel hurt? I have to be able to be in the discomfort of the contraction. And if I can keep my attention on that discomfort, then my body, the intelligence that is in there, can tell me. It will give me the clarity of what is going on. If we listen to our bodies, if we keep our attention on the sensations, then we'll get the information we need. But if we spin off into the story and self-hatred, then that opportunity is lost. And maybe I'm feeling bad and it's not that I'm out of integrity. Maybe I feel bad because I'm standing up for myself and it's an unusual thing to do, or it's not something that I or many others have been trained to do. We've been people pleasers or whatever our young survival strategy is. When we realize that this strategy no longer serves us and we want to grow and take a stand for ourselves and start setting reasonable boundaries, it's not necessarily going to be popular. And you could feel badly because people who you have relationships with don't get it and they're mad. So is this bad feeling if I'm not out of integrity? Am I breaking out of a lifelong pattern and it's just uncomfortable? And I'm uncertain about the unknown and it's scary. Or does this bad feeling come from something I've eaten? Or have I been in a store with like fluorescent lights? There's all kinds of reasons why our bodies feel bad to us. But if we don't sit with the discomfort, it is just such a mechanical, automatic thing to think, self-hatred, I'm bad. Oh, I hate myself because I feel bad. It's my fault. So I just wanted to give that as an example that we don't really know what's going on if we don't examine it. And it could be a variety of things. So that's one way we fall off the razor's edge, is by being taken away by our story. And another story that's very popular is being offended. Oh man, that's a quick jump off the razor's edge from we're offended, because that's how we manipulate people. And that's how people manipulate us. the whole being offended thing, it's a racket and it's a way to manipulate. And it's definitely a way that you've fallen from the razor's edge if you're offended. Our conditioning also boots us down into the murky, bottom dwelling waters. We're taught a lot of rules growing up. Don't put your coat on when you go outside, you're going to catch a cold. Or don't talk to strangers. That's a really big one. And people were like, well, that's a good rule. I don't know. I don't necessarily think it is. And then there's the unspoken rule that we're conditioned to as small children, where someone pushes you to give the creepy uncle a kiss or something. Children's intuition is screaming no to a lot of things, but we don't learn to listen to our intuition. We're not trained in that way. We're given rules to follow, and we're kids. So it's, what do we know? We're just going to think that the people who are older have our best interest at heart. And they do. Mostly they really do. I guess we assume they know what they're doing. And that's maybe not quite accurate. In any case, we're not trained to pay attention to our intuition. I just want to say one more thing, too. Maybe we're feeling bad because we think we're jerks. And maybe we are jerks. This is a possibility as well. Maybe we really are jerks. So don't dismiss that one. But if we are, then fix it and learn from it. Take your knocks and move on. And if you're not ready to do that, well, that's okay. Life will give you something to pay attention. And either you pay attention or it'll go a little louder that you should pay attention. So if you're a jerk, just own it is one thing. So examining ourselves, feeling our sensations, getting whatever insights we can, I've discovered that the clearer we see ourselves, the more we can trust ourselves. And trusting ourselves, I discovered, doesn't mean that you have to be trustworthy in every area of your life. That's a high bar. But you can be trustworthy if you know where you're trustworthy and where you aren't trustworthy. And if you know where you aren't trustworthy, don't try and hide it, especially if you're not being trustworthy affects others, right? Tell them, don't send me to the store for cookies. You're only going to get half a package by the time I get back. I'll eat the cookies. You can't trust me to bring home a full pack of cookies. Whatever it is, you can trust yourself if you know where you're trustworthy and where you're not trustworthy. And you act with integrity, knowing that. And as a bonus, you will also know when others are trustworthy and when they're not trustworthy. And if you can accept yourself as you are, then you can accept others as they are. And you'll see, if you can train and hold your attention as much as you can when dealing with yourself and dealing with others, that a lot of times we might mistake what we think is someone else being untrustworthy. We just aren't understanding where they're coming from. There's a lot of reasons, I guess, that people don't meet our unexamined expectations of them, we'll say. I also find that a lot of times people think other people are like them. So if I acted in this certain way, then I'm not trustworthy. Then I'll assume that if they act the same way, then they're not trustworthy. So I am mostly, I won't say 100%, I am mostly trustworthy to do the dishes right after I eat. Now, this has been a thing in our marriage where it's like, this is my habit. This is what I think is the best way to be. I am trustworthy to do the dishes. My husband, not so much, especially in the beginning. Although now, 30 years in, we're still living together. It's good. So I assumed because he wouldn't do the dishes the way I would do it, he couldn't be trusted to do the dishes. The dishes weren't done because he's being passive aggressive or something. There's something that I'm going to be attached by or offended by that is going to push me off the razor's edge. And my attention is going to be caught by the fact that he didn't do his dishes and all the story around behind it. It's only taken me about 29 years to realize we really roll a lot on our assumptions and unexamined beliefs. So when I can see more clearly about myself and what I'm doing, then I could finally see that it's not doing the dishes to make me mad. So there you go. So accepting others as they are. If I know myself, and that includes knowing my boundaries and knowing what works for me and what doesn't work for me, and bearing in mind that I, and probably most people, want to be the best, kindest, most helpful person we can be. And we can have boundaries so that we know we're looking after ourselves as well, which is very important. So last night, my husband and I met a young man who was down on his luck, and he asked to borrow a bit of money because he didn't have any groceries. And he's going to do some work for us tomorrow. Okay, he feels like he's just down on his luck. There's no feeling of this is somebody who's going to try and take advantage of us or anything. So, okay, he asked for like $40 advance. So we gave him the $40 and took him to the grocery store. And we got to the grocery store at the same time as this huge school bus full of a sports team. So the store was empty and now it's packed. And so we'll wait at the car and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And wow, the lineups are probably really long. There's this huge sports team in there. And then they're all back on the bus. The bus is left. The guy hasn't come out of the store yet. Because we're hungry. We want to go home and eat. And then I figure, well, okay, I'll give it another 2 minutes and then I'm going to text him. Are you almost done? Kind of thing. Well, I got a text from him and he had bumped into a sister of a friend who'd taken him to another store on the other side of town because groceries were cheaper over there. And he'd probably been gone for half an hour before he thought to let us know. It was just funny. It could be funny because I knew I wasn't going to let myself be taken advantage of. And that when my boundary was reached about, okay, it's time for me to do something else now, I would just communicate that. I'm just saying that as an example of if we know ourselves and our boundaries, we can accept other people as we are. This poor guy was probably thrilled to see someone he knew and completely forgot that we were waiting on the other side of town for him to come out of the store. So there's a lot of ways to fall off of the razor's edge, but it's very actually easy to get back up on the razor's edge. You just have to relax and let go of whatever is weighing us down. Like presto, changeo, you let go and then you snap back up to the top of the razor's edge. It's like those movies. Groundhog Day is a good one, right? The guy goes to sleep, he wakes up, he's back at the beginning again. Or Russian Doll, that's a series where this woman, she keeps dying and then she wakes up at the beginning of the day again. Or The Day After Tomorrow, it's like action adventure or sci-fi thing.
About this term, the razor's edge. Of course, I'm familiar with it, but I went and looked it up because I was a little confused by how you were using that term. And what I read as a description was it's being in a very uncertain and dangerous situation, or in a difficult or precarious position, or in a position in which two different things are carefully balanced, which I take to mean not in a really good way. So I'm wondering how you're using it. I don't really feel like I want to get up onto a razor's edge, or if I was to get off of one, I wouldn't want to get back on. I wonder if you could explain that.
Sure. I have 3 very short quotes I'll read to you. The first 2, I don't know who said them, and they're attributed to unknown. The journey of self-discovery is akin to walking the razor's edge, a delicate balance between introspection and engagement with the world. And then another similar one is the quest for spiritual growth is often described as walking the razor's edge, a path that demands both discipline and surrender. And then I have a third one by Jordan Peterson. Life is about walking the razor's edge, where one must navigate between chaos and order to find true harmony. So I hope that's helpful, and thank you. I probably should have started with those.
To me, being on the razor's edge about something is where you're spiritually and sexually heightened because there is imminent danger of falling and losing your perspective of existence or whatever it is you're focused on. And so walking the razor's edge does have an element of danger, and spiritually walking the razor's edge would kind of allude to being able to maintain your sense of balance, your sense of ethics, and your sense of honor as you course through this life. And a razor's edge is extremely narrow. The steps you take must be weighed so that you don't fall off. So I get the way you're using the metaphor. You are using it as a metaphor for the path and doing the work. So when you say getting back on the razor's edge, you are talking about maintaining that balance, is my perception.
For me, this takes it to the words and the mind's interpretations of the words. The razor's edge, yes, it is narrow. It sounds sharp and it sounds dangerous. And I think an argument could be made that whenever our attention is taken from us, that is dangerous. It's dangerous to our well-being and our relaxation and our being able to live a healthy, enjoyable life. Using words, one could even say it's also life-threatening, because what kind of a life is a mechanical life? It's not like the body is necessarily going to be in danger, but if we're just going through life by rote, then what kind of a life is that?
What resonates for me when you're talking about staying aware, staying awake, is encompassed in the acronym for mindfulness, which is RAIN, which is recognize what's going on in the moment, outside and inside, accept rather than reject or deny or minimize what's going on, whatever it is in the current situation, inside and outside, investigate. So I'm investigating what's my body sensations, what are thoughts about it, what emotions are coming up, and being with it, not rejecting it, with self-doubt or self-criticism or an inner critic. And the N stands for non-identification or not personalizing it, non-attachment. Instead of I'm doing something wrong, well, oh, I made a mistake. Just being with it, like you're saying, you're not identifying, I'm not a bad person. This is part of being human. So I'm just sharing how I process it. If I don't identify with it, if I don't personalize it, then it's easier to have a sense of equilibrium and balance and come to a skillful action.
Yeah, I would say that that's the same thing. Different words, same thing. Okay, so there are these 3 quotes that I read that talk about walking on the razor's edge. And the fact that it's narrow, to me, means you have to pay attention. And the attention is the point of the whole talk. And no doubt the point of our life, in fact, is where is our attention? And is it still our attention? Or has it been taken by something or someone else? So in my mind, I made up a meaning that the razor's edge was like a brick wall, only it was about 2 bricks wide. So it was easy to walk on if I was paying attention, but I could be relaxed. I wasn't being so careful and so scared. But I think that the razor's edge being your journey of self-discovery, it's going to work better if we can be relaxed with it instead of filled with trepidation. I've lived a lot of my life afraid of everything pretty much. And I have found it's not useful at all and detrimental. And so to me, it's important to be able to relax as we go through life. And that doesn't mean that we get lazy or that we don't hold ourselves accountable. We should always hold ourselves accountable for our actions. And yet we need to be relaxed. So getting back on the razor's edge is letting go of the things that weigh us down, letting go of all those personality ways of responding to situations, whether it's through grasping or jealousy or even taking things personally, and not just bad things personally, but just whatever is going on in life is what's going on in life. And it's part of the paradox. It's not about us, even if it's about us, even if we have to be responsible for it, it's not about us. So to get back on the razor's edge, we just have to, like it's easy, let go of what's holding us down. And it's not easy. It's simple, but it's super hard. But I find that it's a little easier if we cultivate a point of view of trusting life. What do you want to call it? Trust God, trust the universe. It doesn't matter. If you live from a place of trust that you will be looked after, it's a lot easier to relax and work. I have discovered that I can trust life. And the key to this is understanding that what life provides me might not be what I want, might not be the way I think it should look, might not meet my expectations or my preferences, but I will be looked after. If I can let go of all my opinions, I can trust life to look after me. It's something that comes and goes, although I'm glad to say as I get older and older, I can trust it more and more. I guess from all the relentlessly doing it and dropping it and picking it up again and all that stuff. So trusting life makes a difference. And holding ourselves accountable and not letting our preferences and our expectations rule the day. I also just wanted to make a note. We've touched on it briefly about words, like even the words razor's edge, which could be interpreted 2 completely different ways, obviously now. I used to be very afraid that I had to do things right. Okay. I grew up as the kind of person that would watch very carefully, figure out what's going on, what is the right way to do things so that I wouldn't draw attention to myself. So the thing with that is that I would hear words or instructions and I wouldn't know what they would mean necessarily, but it would keep me frozen for a long time trying to figure out the words someone was telling me. And I'm not talking about a job. I'm talking about spiritual examination and practice, even like duality, non-duality, content, context, different words. And so what I want to say is that if you haven't found the words that work for you yet, keep looking for them. Keep being open to them. I don't know how many of you guys have read the book Self-Observation by Brett Hawk, but I highly recommend it. It's a great, great book. And part of the instruction in the book is to sense the breath and sense the body. And that worked for me for quite a time. And then I found it wouldn't hold my attention anymore. And then I read The Reality of Being by Jean de Salzman. And in the beginning, she talks about putting attention equally on the three centers. And I was like, whoa, that's a great idea, right? But I couldn't quite get it to work for me. But then later on in the book, she talked about being still and sensing the energy in your body. And I'm, whoa, that I can do. Those words work for me. Basically, I think all those examples of all those words, they're talking about the same thing, except some of those words I can hear or make more sense to me than other words. So I just want to encourage people, if you haven't found the words that work for you yet, that's okay. Yeah. For me, it was, oh, there must be something wrong with me. And there we go down that rabbit hole again. But there are words out there that can work. I also had some other thoughts about clarity and seeing clearly when we're at the top of the razor as opposed to being in the murky waters at the bottom. Words do help focus attention. And there's a difference between labeling something and naming something. So when I get an uncomfortable feeling in my body, back to the self-hatred topic, I'm bad or I'm not worth it, that is labeling. I can only explain it, I think, by example. I just ate way too much sugar. That is naming it. And naming something accurately makes it easier to let go of. So I just wanted to toss that in for this talk too. There's a lot of information that I'm wanting to share with you guys here that I wish someone had told me. And people probably did tell me. I just didn't hear what they were saying. Now I know that the nuts and bolts, the how to, even though I've heard there is no how to, in one domain there is a how to, and knowing how to does help make a difference. So long as we understand we need to find our own how to, but learning how other people can do it can help point us in a direction. So the crux of the matter at the end of the talk, the end of the day, at the end of our lives is we need our attention. We need to work to reclaim our attention because as far as I can tell, and if anyone has a different idea, I'm open to hear it, but attention is all we have or the most important thing we have. And so there's two quotes from Jean de Salzman. This is from The Reality of Being on page 91. In a moment of work, I first take back part of the attention lost in identification and relate it to the most intimate reality in myself. My attention changes by virtue of being turned toward another possibility. But in order to be present, I have to then turn again toward life with this new attention. One part of it remains aware of my reality. The other is directed towards life with all the risks of identification. There is a conscious effort to be related at the same time with both higher forces and lower forces. I am in the middle between two worlds. My attention is entirely mobilized in two directions at the same time and remain active in order not to allow myself either to be carried away or withdrawn from action. I see the fluctuation of my level of being. Unquote. And so I would say that's a great quote of The Razor's Edge, to be in the middle of the two worlds. And now I'll read the quote that was in the email. It is only by working to be present that my attention will develop. When it has a better quality, I struggle to keep it from weakening. I try to prevent it from being taken. I try but cannot, and I try again. I begin to understand what this requires from me, even if I cannot do it. In the struggle where I come back and then go again toward manifestation, I see that my attention is completely taken. It is entirely lost to me. But if it does not go too far, it can be pulled back as by a magnet. In that movement of my attention, I learn something of its nature. I will have to go towards manifestation, and I will always lose myself unless my attention goes both toward life and toward the inside. Unquote.
I don't know if you want to get into the difference between self-observation and self-remembering, because I think this is useful.
Okay. Do you want to take that?
Me? No. I'm asking you. I can do something, but I'd rather...
Can you start? Because you know what? This is a fuzzy area for me. So I'd appreciate it if you could start this ball rolling.
How I've understood it and practiced it is that self-observation is a mental process, like developing the witness to whatever degree you stabilize the witness. And self-remembering is a sensual process, which is something like self-sensing, feeling whatever is going on in your body.
Madame de Salzman does talk about the importance of being able to keep equal attention on all three centers, in the mind, the intellectual center, the heart, the feeling center, and the body, the moving center. So I have no problem being in my head. And so I don't know how that relates to self-observation and self-remembering.
I would say that self-observation is you watch yourself, and self-remembering is you find yourself or you re-find yourself. Ah, there you are. Ah, here I am. It's very different.
I may have this entirely wrong because I'm not as well versed in Madame de Salzman or Gurdjieff as some of the others here, but to me, self-remembering is a noun, the perception of self in or with the body, where self-observation is noticing the verb, the actions that you're taking, the actions of the things that you're perceiving. So I break it down into those semantics.
Well, I've thought that self-remembering has to do with coming back to being here right now in the body. Then I'm remembering myself. I don't know if that's a complete description, but coming back and realizing that I'm here right now and not in my imagination. And self-observation more has to do with what's going on for me, paying attention to my thoughts and feelings. And just in terms of attention, one thing that really strikes me about the quotes that you read, my attention is lost when I'm identified. When I'm identified, I'm thinking, I'm imagining, and I'm not present. And when I can bring my attention to that and realize that I'm identifying in a situation, I'm upset by something or whatever is going on for me, then I can pull my attention back and, oh, remember, I'm here right now in front of the screen, and there you all are. And to me, in terms of the topic, it seems like we walk a razor's edge of really having some attention on the present moment and being lost in imaginings, which is most of the time to me. But why is that a razor's edge? Why is that really crucial? It seems like most of us really like sleep. I mean, I do. I'm just imagining things, my little world, my bubble. It doesn't seem like it's so critical to me all the time to maintain the kind of attention that we're talking about. But maybe it is.
To me, it goes back to words again. I get what people are saying about the difference between self-observation and self-remembering. And it's not like that for me. And I'm so glad now there's a lot of information coming out about people's brains work differently. It doesn't mean anybody's right and somebody's wrong. We all have our own experience. And what you're saying about whether it's critical or not, critical is relative, right? I think that we're born on earth to live in joy in life and joy with each other. And yeah, if you look at the world is not reflecting that. But my world reflects that to me because I am choosing to live in a not critical life. And that doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen. We live in duality too. There's happiness and sadness for sure. But in the big picture, and I'll say, because it's the title of the talk, from the razor's edge, which is a viewpoint in which you can see the duality and the non-duality, then it's all part of something bigger. And it doesn't have to be critical.
When I said critical, I meant in terms of important.
Important compared to what, though? And then it's compared to important, right? But isn't it important to appreciate each other and be kind to each other? And then I think we can be kinder if we have the attention to see where someone needs some kindness. Everything is relative and duality.
Yes, as long as we're speaking of razor's edges, I think it's appropriate to talk about that feeling that it's critical. That's what motivates me. We can talk about what my beliefs are or what the Gurdjieffian beliefs are about the imperative to do the work. But without that imperative, I would be a lot lazier than I am. I need that. I value it, but I'm glad that I have it. We have to choose our beliefs, and they can motivate us.
So why is it important, critical, to work on attention for you?
It's critical to keep attention between yourself and the divine, for one thing. And it's important to have a fire on your ass to make that happen.
Why?
Time is so short and the work is so hard. unless you can stay in there with a hammer and chisel or whatever metaphor you want to use, you have to become steady at it and keep at it for decades.
Okay. Tell me again what you just said. Would you please, about why it's important to, like the phrase, practice like your hair's on fire?
Because it's an attachment to a belief that unless a certain amount of work is done, then the energy of a person will eventually be recycled into some other value, some other life form. And I want to go on and evolve.
What's motivating about that, though? I would rather be motivated by life is short and life is precious. And I just want to live it to the fullest, the best and most honest that I can, with as much attention as I can, just from the joy of it.
Yeah, that's why I said we choose our beliefs.
Okay.
And then we follow them.
To me, you're both talking about the necessity for continued persistent effort, regardless of the belief system that you put that in. And I wholeheartedly agree. And sometimes I just get lazy. So yes, persistence, sustained persistence is necessary on the path.
In order to make the effort of non-identification, I'll use that term instead of self-remembering and or self-observation, because it would take that to not identify. To do that, we need energy, and energy comes from practice and a discipline so that you're not identifying and losing energy continuously through identification. And I found that different times of the day, like I'm much better able to practice self-remembering when I wake up. And as the day goes on, the gaps become longer, at least for myself. And that repetition makes a difference. You try and self-remember and you remember at the end of the day, oh, I haven't done it at all. That's one self-remember. But after a long time, whatever a long time is, the frequency of your remembering increases quite a bit. And so persistence in that, even though at the beginning it may seem like there's almost no result, there are results. And they seem to be cumulative, as if you're developing the witness or another body. That's my experience.
Whether you use the word attention, like attending to my body or my feelings or what's going on out here, or the word awareness. When I think of awareness, going back to what's really important about that, for me, it's awareness of what is, awareness of my true feelings or my true sensation right now, or what's happening right now. It has to do with the reality of what is. And it's important to notice what is and attending to it rather than just being in the head, kind of losing ourselves in our own little bubble that may not be connected that much to what is and what's happening. I may be into my expectations or my fantasies or whatever, and then I'm lost. It's like a trance. It's like a fantasy world. And so it's really important, to me, it's really important just to be with what is in this moment. So whether you use the word attention, like attending to that, or awareness, for me, it's a little bit easier to use the word awareness for some reason. I want to be aware. That is really important. And then when I'm more aware, I can make better decisions. I have more clarity of mind. I can also be more open. I'm more open to what is, whether it's having a more open mind or a more open heart. All of that comes, from my experience, with awareness or attending to, attention. It's a more intimate way of living. The word intimate is coming up. It's intimate in terms of I'm relating to this now. I'm right in it now. I'm not in my little bubble of fantasy land. For me, that's why it's so important. It's crucial. It's critical to living life well.
I had just been reading recently about a distinction between different kinds of meditation. Two kinds. One, conditional meditation. This is what happens for me a lot, is where I sit and I think about things and I'm working on problems or thinking through situations. And I can go a whole meditation sometimes like that. And then there's unconditional meditation where that all falls away and there's just being, there's just attention. And the author of this book that I'm reading says that that's actually practicing with being who we really are. To me, I'm just like everybody else, I guess, happy to go along and have my life just develop. But I see that everything conditional will go. But what lasts is probably my attention, my being, who I am. And I think that that's important. You know, at times I really get the importance of that. And then a lot of times I just forget.
Okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb here because why not? So sure, it's important. And I'm only speaking to this because this is how I see it in my own way that sometimes I think nobody else sees the same way, which is fine. And somebody probably does. So it's more important to have our attention because then after we die, we don't just all dissipate. But my point of view is, so what? I think what's important is that we're kind to each other and that when we're kind to someone, then the person we're kind to will be kind to someone else. And that when we're compassionate and when we're generous and when we're that way with each other, then that ripples out and that makes a difference. From my perspective, or what I'm choosing to believe at this time, that is how God lives in the world, because we're kind. And I don't know what happens after we die. And there may be another version of me and there may not. And I don't even know, what does that matter?
Well, to be kind truly to someone, I would think you'd have to have your attention with the person. You'd have to be in relationship with them as they are.
Anyone else have a comment on their own personal point of view of life and death and what's important? So I don't think there's a right and a wrong.
Well, I'll say just briefly that I believe that a person who's working on themselves is performing a kindness to humanity and to the earth itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true.
I really like what you said, Juanita, about kindness. Sometimes just a kind word or a kind thought or an expression of kindness from you to someone else or being on the receiving end of that can be all the different in the world.
Yeah, I think we all have our own peace, our own life, and we should all live our lives the best we can. And that's what's important here and now. And we don't need to try and be like anybody else. We each have our own job and our own path. And if we live the best life we can as much as we can and work on ourselves if and when we can, then to me, that's a whole lot. That's a lot. And that's why we're here, to live our own individual lives and realize that we're not separate from each other.